is intact. And then you look at the theurgic sort of component of that event, and it fits all these other points. Because, like I was saying, 1947 is a 10 times 19.47, which is actually a fractal, the date of the Roswell event. But 19.47 is a signature of a tetrahedral geometry, the superposition of a tetrahedron in a rotating sphere.
Right.
Well, it also is a function of time, because if you were to map out exactly how many minutes and seconds are in a perfect third of an hour, what you have to do is you have to multiply 60 times 0.33.
Right.
So you can get the minutes. What you get is 19.8. Now, that means there's 19 minutes in a perfect third of an hour. The 0.8, to convert it to, the sexagesimal system, you have to multiply again times 60.8, and you get 47. So a perfect third of an hour is 47. As you notice that when I took 60 times 0.33, I got 19.8. And of course, from 33 AD to 2012, 2013 you get 1980.
Right.
But you also realize that the nation of Israel, where all these prophecies originated, except for the prophets that were in exile in Babylon, and of course God and Patmos. But the focus of where all these end-time prophecies are going to culminate, and especially when you look at Revelation 11 and Revelation 12, it's focusing again on the temple in Jerusalem. That would never have actually been possible, and it won't be possible, except for the fact that Israel was reborn again as a nation in 1948.
Right.
In 1948, in their Jewish calendar, their year actually covers 1947 and 1948. Their new year actually begins in the fall, Tishri, and also at the civil year, and then the religious year begins in the spring. So they fit the third principle also. And another point is, if you look at the UFO phenomena as connected to crop circles, the crop circle phenomena is a full-blown modern occurrence, has been celebrated as occurring in 1980, and then from there forward. In 1980, the first circles and the actual idea of crop circle was coined in England, and from then it continually rose, and it's interesting that more than 90% of all the official and bona fide crop circles occur in Wiltshire, England.
Right.
And Wiltshire, England is home to several megalithic sites, and the one I think is the most significant when it comes to the crop circle phenomena, and one in which crop circles itself actually materialize over and over again every year, is the Avebury Circle. The Avebury Circle is set at latitude, and at a latitude that if you divide 360 by 7, 360 by 7, you get the exact latitude of the Avebury Circle. And what's interesting is that when Julius Caesar wrote about the Druids, that actually knew who built these things, and they said they were much more ancient than what contemporary historians say now.
Right.
He said that they had a particular fascination with the proportion and the size of the Earth. That they viewed this as something that was so incredibly important that they built these incredible monuments to them. But he didn't understand why they thought these things were so important.
Yeah.
Well, the latitude then of the Avebury Circle is 51.42857 degrees. That's in decimals.
Yeah.
Interestingly, so if you would trace a line from the center of the Avebury Circle to the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, the line extends 2,009 nautical miles. And when you extend a line from Jerusalem Temple Mount to some of the most ancient horses in Wiltshire, some of those chalk horses that you see,
right,
which is interesting because there are 2 white horses mentioned in Revelation. And the first one is which this conqueror who comes, a world conqueror, which is referred to as the Antichrist. He comes on a white horse. The second one is the Messiah in his second coming, and he comes at the end to conquer at the Battle of Armageddon, as it is in context in Revelation. Those two white horses exist in the book of Revelation. If you look at this distance, though, you find them at the distance of 2012 and also around 2015, nautical miles.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
What's interesting about nautical miles, though, as using that as a distance calibrator, is it's just based on a ratio of 360 and 60, or minutes in an hour, and the distance in degrees of a circle. That's all nautical mile is based on. So if you want to know how far around it is on the Earth, say the Earth is a perfect sphere, which it isn't, but let's say if it was, all you have to do is multiply 360 times 60, and you get 21,600 miles.
Mm.
So by discovering this distance relationship between these places in Wiltshire, where the majority of crop circles show up, and Jerusalem, then you start thinking, why are these crop circles showing up there? I found that some of these crop circles actually show up in this distance correlation to the year they show up. They actually are manifested there. And the latest one that I think is really making waves supposedly demonstrates the number pi.
That's right. Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that.
10th digit.
Yeah.
And biblically, these things have been using pi and using pi as a function in prophecy is something that Newton did, and it's something that I found is absolutely valid. And one example I think I can give: when Babylon fell to the Medes and Persians in 539 BC, it was the same night that Belshazzar was actually having this huge feast, and he toasted to his gods using some of the vessels from the Temple of Jerusalem that he had destroyed.
Mm-hmm.
And when he did this, a disembodied hand appeared and wrote on the wall, which scared Belshazzar so much that he called all the astrologers to figure it out. And the only one who could figure it out was actually the head of the astrologers. His own stepfather had actually put him at the head of all the astrologers, and that was Daniel the prophet from Jerusalem.
Yeah.
And Daniel interpreted it. And in Hebrew, mine tekel parsim is actually not just the idea of weighing, measuring, dividing, which was the interpretation of the kingdom of Babylon was weighed and it was divided between the Medes and the Persians. And Midi, actually, the Medes and the Persians, is interesting because their two names is actually incorporated in that word scheme that was on the wall.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also a number, because mini tekel parsim is monetary value. And the most basic monetary value in those times was a gera. It's like a penny, I suppose, in our system.
Okay.
And so all you have to do, you can go to a concordance, you can actually find what these values were. Tumina is 2,000 geras. A tekel is 20. And a parsin, or to divide the mina, is 500.
Mm-hmm.
So the number that was on the wall was 2,520. That's a very interesting number because it's, of course, 7 times 360, I believe. Yeah, 7 times 360.
Okay, yeah.
But here's the other thing about it, and most people don't realize this. If you take 2,520 times pi, you actually get the mean diameter of our Earth, 7,916.81 miles across.
Okay.
If you take that number times pi again, of course, you get the circumference of the Earth. So this is a number that actually fits with pi and demonstrates exactly what our dimensions of our own planet is. All the way back, and this number was manifested in the Old Testament, even before the Torah, the Pentateuch, and what the books of Moses were, when they were written.
Yeah.
And especially when you find it in these prophecies, especially Daniel, one of the most time-oriented, time-based wow, I mean, how did these ancients know these things?
Yeah.
And you can prove them to yourself. Newton knew these things. Newton was actually trying to pin these things down because you really couldn't figure out exactly how large the Earth was. At the time, there was lots of speculation on how many miles were for every degree, and he didn't know what the equatorial bulge was. He knew the Earth wasn't, it was an ellipsoid. It wasn't a perfect sphere. But what's interesting about these numbers, and the number that I just showed you about the average or the mean diameter of the Earth, it takes into account that, of course, if the Earth is flatter at the poles and bulges at the equator, what you're really going to see then is the average, the number for the average size of the Earth.
Yeah.
It's something that is, I think, a little bit more sophisticated than even saying, well, this is exactly what this dimension is from pole to pole. That could actually change when, if we have, redistribution of ice on the poles or, some sort of cataclysm. You can start turning your paradigm then about the ancient text as being just metaphor or strivings of the ancient mind to understand something very grand to perhaps a way of thinking that is even exceeding our own scientifically. And that in it you can find everything you need to pinpoint that point in the future when this great time, this incredible time of men transferring from one state to another, transferring from this mortal coil to an immortal state.
Right.
That is something that's absolutely huge. And it's intact in the ancient text.
That is very interesting. And David, I just want to pick up on one note there, because when you mention the fact that we potentially could become immortal or at least extend our lives for such a long time that we would be considered to be immortal, then, Terence McKenna, I know that he talked about this idea of the AI or the artificial system coming in, and he connected it with the singularity basically, and through novelty and the time waves zero theory around 2012, things become really interesting there, because that becomes like a converging point, and I guess there is two sides to all of this that you can look at, and one is obviously the spiritual or theological side to this that you presented to us right now. But then one thing that I'm also kind of looking at, or at least finding to be very interesting, is kind of the technological aspect to all of this, if you will, because we can actually look at, let's take Roswell, that incident, and let's say that man gained incredible technological knowledge from that, and that we're actually building a lot of our technology today upon those systems that we're back engineering and so forth. But what many people are looking at, if we take Ray Kurzweil or people of his ilk, they're looking forward towards this kind of technological singularity, and that these machines or these AI are going to help us to transcend death because of their technological advancements. So at the same time as we have this kind of thread running that you talked about, we also have this other one kind of running alongside that one. I don't know if you're well versed in all of this, but I find it interesting that these two are kind of coming together at the same point then, potentially. What do you think about that?
Well, that's interesting you should say that. The publisher of my book, Tom Horn, his anomalous publishing company is taking care of the Temple of the Center of Time, but he also has written many books, and it's about genetics.
Right.
The whole idea that the technology is arriving again to create beings, super beings, and to adjust the genome the human genome, so that there can be an extension of life. And interestingly, again, it ties back into what was happening in Genesis 6, this idea of manipulating the human genome and creating super beings. And technologically, too, if you look at what's been written about Atlantis or Lemuria or Mu, that we had technology that was so far in advance of what we have now. And